California. And so we're doing like a lot of training. There's so much math involved. It's crazy.
Right.
Like I never thought that it was just basically going to be me sitting in a car doing math all the time. But yeah, so I'm healing my relationship with numbers. It was pretty fun. Okay, I'm going to all set up now. And you can hear me now?
Okay, can I just want to give me
Bye.
a test here, Vaughn?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hear me
Gotcha.
okay?
Yeah, I got you good now.
All right. Cool. First off, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I don't mind at all.
Man, this is a new podcast for me, and if I could pick the perfect person to talk to on this podcast, it would be you. So I'm like super stoked about it.
Thank you.
I found you through your wife, Jess. We used to work at Barbell Shrug together, and sometimes I help her with web projects because my background is web development, and we work really well together. She makes everything look pretty, and I know how to make it work the internet, so we make a good team.
She's quite creative.
Yeah, she is. So it's really crazy, man. I feel like the universe just kind of put you on my radar at the most opportune time, both for this podcast and even personally. It's springtime around here, and I went out to do my first yard work for the year, mowing the yard and doing all that stuff. And I usually try to listen to podcasts when I do that. And so today it was you and Angelo on the Alpha Hippie podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And then I came in and sat down and watched the video on the Special Forces experience. And man, I'm all about it. I love it. So I'm like super excited to talk to you. So if I sound like a fanboy, I apologize.
It was designed for men, so it doesn't surprise me that it's intriguing to you.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. I can't tell if it's because I'm 43. I turned 43 this year, and I can't tell if it's just like a normal process of life for someone my age to be like, what am I doing with my life, and what do I want to do? Like, where am I? What's going on? So I'm sure we'll get into that later, but I want to say, just to give you a little background, I started this podcast because I'm so fascinated with people's stories and how they have succeeded in their journeys, and like what kinds of things they've done to make changes in their lives to be successful and get to their goals. I've been on kind of a hero's journey myself for the last few years. And a couple years ago, I got into that whole hero's journey thing and started recognizing, wow, like this is what's going on with me. I'm experiencing these things and growing and learning and just leveling up, and just now starting to pay attention to those kinds of things. So it falls in line with a lot of the stuff that you're doing. So that's why I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's we kind of call it ancient wisdom, if you will. People who used to talk and speak more metaphorically and through story much more, kind of before science really took hold. And now we're starting to see how these metaphorical stories, the way they spoke, actually makes sense, right? With the hero's journey, just right. Calling it the hero's journey, how it's laid out, but it makes sense.
Well, it's crazy. It's crazy when you start to recognize it. Like I don't have your background, but once I come from, like, I'm a dad with 3 kids, a typical suburban lifestyle, up until I decided to go and get fit and all that stuff. But that's a whole other story. But like, once you start recognizing, like when I lost my job and then went into business for myself and started doing all these things and had these crises, once you start looking at that, you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm in the middle of this experience, this journey, what am I going to learn from this? And then when you come out of it, you're like, okay, I'm that hero that's come back now, and I've learned all these new things, and what am I going to do with it? Does that make any sense at all?
And if you're on like oh yeah, of course it does. And I think if you're in good universal alignment and you're on that right path, which can be hard to find, especially in the modern world, you always come out of it with no regret, nothing but lessons. And it's kind of like the obstacle's the way, you know?
Right. All right. So before we go any further, I just want to put something out there. And as I was mowing my yard today and listening to you and Angelo talk, I thought it was the perfect thing. My goal, I have a new goal that I am going to apply one day for the process, and we'll get into what it is. But I think a good goal for me would be to get to a point where I think I could apply for that experience, right? And so I'm just going to put that out there. So
Okay. I'm super glad you're interested in it.
Oh man, it's very fascinating. But let's do some background stuff. Like where did all this start?
You know, I guess it depends on how far back you want to go. Because to me, everything starts as a young child, and it's kind of that butterfly effect that comes through your whole life. It's all there, right? The basis of all your neural programming it's from childhood. I was always into things like that. Not that something like this program really exists in its full form, which it is now, but you know, one thing leads to another. And I won't get too deep into my story, but one thing does lead to another. Eventually I'm in the military. I'm in the infantry, in an airborne unit. I was always a thrill seeker when I was younger until I leveled out a bit. And then eventually it ends up, I'm in Joint Task Force 2, which is Canada's Tier 1 unit. I finished my career there as a sniper. But, you know, as these stories go a lot, I met a woman, and that's Jess, and you know Jess, and she was a complete catalyst for everything. Right. I thought I was on this one vector, and that was going to be it for the rest of my life. And I meet her, and I know a lot of people, you know, they sometimes de-emphasize this word, but when you fall in love, it's the perfect time to really rewrite your story. All the hormones and all the chemicals going on in your brain, it's the perfect time to start that reassessment. It just happened that it fell at that time in my life, you know, 35. That's kind of what a guy, you know, he's been in his career, he kind of starts thinking about it, you know, it happens. It happens a little younger sometimes, or a little older, but it sparked that. And then we started the conversation of it, and years of research, figuring out how we wanted to do it, you know, taking all those skills I had and applying it to the next step. A lot of ups and downs. It's been pretty good. In between there, we were pretty busy. We started a co-working space. We bought some commercial and residential real estate. We were kind of dabbling around quite a bit, figuring out which way to go. But yeah, I would say, and I'll always say it, is Jess was the catalyst for that life change. And it was all about stepping back and doing exactly what I do with the Special Forces experience, looking at the spectrum of myself, which includes psychology, physiology, you know, skills, and spiritual preferences, and kind of being like, okay, well, which way do I go with this now? You know, they're deep contemplative questions that led to we call it the SFE, and then each serial will have its own name. The first serial is called the process.
I want to step back a little bit and go back. I think I heard you say on another podcast that you got into when 9/11 happened, that's what made you want to go into the military. Is that right?
Yeah. So I've always wanted to be part of the military. It was one of those things, you know, I grew up playing in the outdoors, shooting guns, like a young boy should. And then a few things happened where I couldn't sign up. I had to help out my folks at work, you know, as things do in life. But I remember it. I was taking computer systems engineering in college and watching it live. And it was like, no, that's it. It's time to go. I actually, at the time it happened, I had my paperwork in to be part of the American military. but that day onwards, they stopped taking foreigners. So
Right.
that forced me into the Canadian channels. But yeah, that's it. I spent 4 years in college. I took computer systems engineering and chemical engineering, and it was always just like, this is what you do. And it was never really my place. I always knew it was going to be something more maybe adventurous. But yeah, 9/11 changed everything, as it did for a lot of people, you know?
Yeah. And so you did that for 13 years, right? And the story of you meeting Jess was I thought was pretty cool. You said you were teaching a class or something like that.
Yeah, so I was a jump master. So for a thing called HAHO, high altitude, high opening skydiving.
Okay.
So, think all the way up using oxygen tanks and all that kind of stuff. So jump master is kind of in control of all the sticks in the air and stuff. I won't get into the details, but we were also instructing on a course, and this is down in California, and it was too windy, and we ended up getting stop drop, they call it, for the weekend. And as one might, we looked into what are we going to do for the weekend, and we ended up in San Diego. We rented a Airbnb beach house. It was just, beautiful, beautiful day. The whole day was perfectly magical and very serendipitous. Anyways, we're out for, we'll call it hangover breakfast, and we meet these two women, and one of them becomes my wife, and I haven't looked back since.
It really is amazing. But the question I wanted to ask you about that was, when I was listening to you talk about it, you said something to the effect of, well, Jess said she doesn't want to have a military lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Like
So a good on her. That was day one. That was, just so people know, that was the first day I met her. We actually told each other we loved each other, and she came out and said right away, she's like, I don't want to be a military wife. She doesn't have a problem with being a military wife, but if I could clarify, she doesn't want me gone all the time. She doesn't want to be and I totally get that. It's very difficult. Military wives or spouses have a very hard time. Their partner's doing something that usually they honor and believe to their core, and there's a lot of sacrifice, and they're gone all the time, but they love it, and yet they're at home, usually with the kids and dealing with all that kind of stuff, not living the dream as it's, so they really do have a tough job, military spouses. So anyway, she clarified that on day one, set the rules, and that's not the reason why I left, but that definitely was a poke in the right direction.
Well, I mean, I wonder if do you think you're just wired a different way than most people? Because do you think most people would just say, oh, well, okay, then forget it? Or is there something about you where you're like, okay, well, I'll just figure out how to make this work? Or is it just love?
Well, I think in these complicated questions, it's never just one facet. Mm-hmm. I do believe I'm wired different. I believe every single human being's kind of wired differently. That's what makes us kind of unique snowflakes, if you will. But the shift that actually falling in love can do at the right time can just change everything. I've always been someone who seeks new and new and new. And as you get older, it kind of spreads out a little. You may keep doing it, but it's not like when you're a young teenager and then to your young early 20s. But it was getting on to be a change in my lifetime. I loved what I did. To me, I really believe in my heart that the tier 1 world is one of the greatest places a man can end up. But I just didn't feel like I was doing the changes or making the changes that I wanted to do. We deploy abroad, so we're out. It's always foreign policy stuff. It's always other people's lives, which is okay to affect, but it's never like here at home,
Mm-hmm. And so you decide. So is this where the Special Forces experience, that's where that whole seed got planted, and you started talking about it? Is that where this all came from?
Yeah. So met Jess, and I would say about 3 weeks into our relationship, we'd already started talking about, okay, exit strategies. And she had mentioned, and you may have heard this, I'm not sure if I mentioned it on another podcast, but like man camps, events, gatherings, masterminds are starting to get a lot of momentum at this time, and for men, I know there's a bunch of different people trying different things. Because you may agree with this, you may not. Men are kind of like a crossroads in my mind where we have all this this DNA, all this programming that's kind of, I'll use the word primitive, but don't think savage, just old, designed for a certain job, like to survive in the wilderness and then, survive as a small knit group. And now we're in this, one big global community, high paced world, all this tech, everything, so guys have all this programming and then they're kind of like trying to really figure out, okay, well, how do I use it? What's my outlet? Okay, karate, this, that. So the idea was around that. Okay, let's see how we can make something from my own unique experiences that men can kind of nourish those sides of themselves, if you will, where it's a safe place to be a man, full out, full on, And yeah, she called it a man camp. Yeah, I laughed out loud because it just seems so far out of my wheelhouse and so like, okay, no, that's not where I'm going here. This is like, it's got to be something else. And then really that I remember we had that discussion, and then shortly after I went to visit her in LA, and we were lying on the grass at the tar pits or the tar ponds, and we were talking about it. We brought it back up, and that was definitely the day where it was boom, this is crystallized, this is where we're going. Now what is it? So then we just started researching. We started talking to men and women, and we asked the questions like, what's right in your life, what's wrong in your life, what's missing, what's not missing, and we started that. And once we kind of had those questions, then we started going into the research, into the psychology and the biology and the neurobiology and neuropsychology of it all, and started tailoring this program together. And just sometimes it got a little overwhelming because it just seemed like layer on layer on layer on layer. I think of The Simpsons. I don't know if you remember this episode, if you ever seen The Simpsons, where they get the kids to design a toy and all the kids are just like throwing input at it, and it just like this weird freaky super toy. It doesn't even make sense. Like it kind of started feeling like that. So we, every now and then you got to dial back. But that's what ended up happening. Just this really great programming that started to layer together that is a total immersive experience for men. It's designed to assess you fully, psychologically, physically, basically all your physiology. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy, all the psychology in there, it's designed to test and most importantly, push it so that you're stronger. So you're stronger. That's the only way we get better, right? Human beings were designed to thrive after defeat and grow from it. And this is kind of like defeat after defeat, if you will. And in situations that are designed to make men scared and push that fear boundary all the time.
So this is your first one coming up on May the 10th, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. 001.
Nice. So who is a couple of questions. How many people do you put through this thing at one time? And also what kinds of people are they?
Okay. So we're starting with 30.
Okay.
And that'll always be the max. And there's a lot of moving parts to this. It moves around. It's not in one place. So there's a lot of complexities there. So you can imagine then there's a lot of cadre. And I try to have it for one cadre for every 2 candidates. That's to maximize everything. So I don't want to spread it any thinner. And I think you start going thinner, it will just detract from the experience. As for the men, what we did is I believe that you need a spectrum, right? If you only are ever surrounded by one type of person, they may be great people, but it doesn't expand your horizons, right? We don't learn through osmosis from each other. So we have roughly from 21 up to 52. I would say the average dude is about 37, if you're to run an average number on that. And they are from all kinds of backgrounds, but I would use the term, in my opinion, high achieving men. They're open-minded, they seek out new experience, they're doing well in life. Not necessarily financially, like they all are, just I think it's kind of a hand in hand, if you will. But we didn't want money to be like a barrier to entry. That was not our thing. It was just about, surrounding ourselves with good men, surrounding themselves with good men. And then if anyone makes it through and scores high enough, they'll be invited into our mastermind. It's kind of like no extra charge or nothing like that. But it's just a group across North America of, potentially some of the finest people out there. And it's this network that's starting. We already have interest around the world. We just didn't want to invite people from all over the world yet. We will next serial. And that's kind of how we see this happening, this network of really great men just spreading around the world. And, common thread, they all suffered through a similar experience. The military has been using this programming for years, where they take troop, break down troop, put him and his team together, and it just builds these bonds. There's something about suffering together that on the other end makes people stronger. I'm sure you see it with I know in my heart, I know that's one of the things about CrossFit that makes it so popular, is when people suffer in a group. As soon as it's done, all those endorphins are going crazy, and then you kind of network, and then you have that common thread that builds on it. So we kind of do that a bit. It just over 8 days of constant volume output.
Well, I run ultra marathons, and even beyond outside of CrossFit, like I really see it like with the 50 miler and the 100-mile runners, whereas there's this like camaraderie about, like, it doesn't matter how well you do at the race. Everybody is there's some sort of common thing that we share with each other, where it's like we all, like you said, we're all suffering through this same experience together, and it really does kind of bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
So if a person signs up makes it through your application process,
mm-hmm.
Where are they going? Do they come to Canada, or where is this happening?
Okay, so I'll chat a little bit about the application. So the application it's layered. So you don't just like, I'm in, that's it.
Right.
It's designed to filter, and not, in a traditional marketing filter funnel. It's designed to start weeding out people that first would never have a chance of making it through. And that's not, we're not trying to just push them aside. It's just like, listen, let's not waste each other's time right now. You come back to me in life when you're more put together on all kinds of levels, and then you have a chance, because I don't want to just take their money and then they show up and quit, morning of day one, like that's really not the game we're trying to play here. So it's pretty stringent. All they get is coordinates. They don't know. They get the coordinates of where they have to meet us, but after that, they don't know where they're going. So we're really pushing this thing called the unknown. When you don't know what you're about to get into, it makes it that much more stressful. And that's a tool we have, and that'll help push those boundaries. The idea is like you come out of it and you're like, okay, well, it's not that you don't feel the fear response. That would be unhealthy, but you're like, well, I've been through this, I can get through that. I've been through this. That's how we get stronger, right? Like, like you mentioned, you have 3 kids, the ultra marathons, the businesses, all those things make you stronger, right? And that's kind of the bigger design of this. But no, they don't know what they're really getting into, other than like we'll call it like an archetypal way, where, we tell them about the science that we're using on them. We tell them what we're testing. We're like, kind of what they're going through. Very, very loosely. The idea is so they cannot practice for anything. Everything is designed to keep them like, overwhelmed. So yeah, they don't know. They know the coordinates of where they're going, and the only way you get the coordinates is if you get accepted. And once they're there, they have no idea where they're going. And no one hopefully will ever know where they're going.
Do you tell them to bring anything with them, or do they just show up?
So the way it works is if they're accepted and they commit to the process, they'll get a package in the mail, and it looks like a government file folder. And inside of that, all the testing and profiling has already begun. So there's a lot of things in it that they don't know that they're being tested on, that they're already starting to be reprogrammed, if you will, and not in a subconscious, cheap way. In a kind of you're the captain of your ship, kind of way, where we're already starting that. And I kind of lost my track there. What were we saying, Vaughn?
Do they bring you? They get a package in the mail.
Yeah. So there is a few things. They do have it's a very minimal kit list. We provide almost everything for them, but there is some opening, and it's mostly designed so that they'll contemplate those things, where we don't just tell them, okay, bring your sleeping bag, bring your rain gear, bring this. We leave it open a little bit. So while the lead up, what we call the Workup Phase 2 portion's going on, they're learning. They're already learning. They're learning about environmental stuff, because not everyone who shows up is an outdoors enthusiast. There is some, but not all of them are. So we want to make sure that there's kind of that learning that whole time. As far as what they show up with, very minimal. Again, that's for us to know, kind of thing, and others to find out. And then when they get there, we provide everything they need to attempt getting through the SFE.
Nice. So did you do any kind of practice rounds for this? Like, did you sign up some buddies or something, like, hey, let's test this stuff, or is this literally the first time you're going to go through this with new people?
We have a background. So we have an ex-SEAL, an ex-Marine, and some other people that have done similar things. And by similar, I mean, like, to me, there's nothing like this out there, but, run events, like coaching, things of that nature, right? And then what we do is it's ongoing. I've done workups with them in person, and then I'm also doing virtual workups to make sure all our stuff is wired tight. And the way I designed the course, though, is it's fairly plug and play, if you will, because our role, like, we're playing a part the whole time, but I need to make sure that it's wired tight. So it's designed to make it manageable for the cadre. And these are guys that I met all over North America that have volunteered. Totally amazing. I can't believe, you speak about timing and kind of universal alignment, and you meet these people and you're like, oh, how did this happen? How did this happen? So that's been pretty cool, building up the cadre. But yeah, workups, virtual workups, video workups, all that kind of stuff. And then some other buffers on the front end that I won't get too in depth with. I hate to really keep it all cloak and dagger, but there's a reason for that.
No, definitely. I totally understand that. And that makes it even better. Right. It makes it even more appealing, actually, that you do that. So tell me what your day looks like on a daily basis. Like, do you have a routine? Like on a normal Monday, what's it look like for you?
So I don't really live my life right now, Vaughn, in a way that, like, Mondays and weekdays and stuff like that, I've started to edge away from normal societal habits and patterns and moved more to other cycles that I believe in following much more, seasonal cycles, lunar cycles, things of that nature, like kind of going back ancient style. So I don't really have, like, okay, I wake up Monday and I do this and I do this and I do this. I do a few things, though. I like to incorporate what I call concentration, contemplation, and meditation into my daily life. Now, concentration, I think anytime you're using your mind or your body and you're vectoring it with purpose, it can be whatever, making breakfast, making this, doing that, exercising, okay? Contemplation, I do sometimes walking. Usually, though, I incorporate that when I read things that I don't want to call them scripture because I'm not a religious man, but things that speak in metaphor, old school algorithms for how to live, the I Ching, Gene Keys, a little bit of the Bible, those kinds of things. Think of those things. And contemplation, what I do there is I pose that question to myself, but in a way, you kind of let it flow a bit meditatively. So I'll clarify in a second a little bit more here. And now meditation, I used to do, cross-legged, eyes closed kind of meditation, but I've moved back to the older style of open-eyed or walking, where you're clearing your mind that way. I really like to get out into nature and touch nature. All the microbes and spores and stuff I think are really good for us, good for our gut bacteria and things like that. So backing up to contemplation, think somewhere in between a concentrative practice and a meditative practice, right? Meditation, you're trying to kind of shut down. Concentration, you're on full bore, and contemplation somewhere in the middle. So I try to incorporate those things into my life. I kind of start there. Once you start to expand on it, a whole bunch of kind of things really come into play, like physical fitness routines and things of that nature. What I usually do is I stick to linear strength training. I love barbell work. When I go to the gym, I'm at the rack and just trying to get stronger. I've dialed it to a different programming right now just for the Special Forces experience. I need to be a little bit more endurance-y,
right?
For the long distance stuff. But I'll do that. I'll alternate, and then on my days off, I kind of do active recovery. But I really like to get outside, run, hike, climb, all at the same time. I'm in Sedona right now, so climbing's unlimited. Moving just through nature like that, I love that. I got a mountain bike. I try to, on those active recovery days, mix life with things I enjoy to do with that movement. Yeah, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yep.
I love getting outside, so I go outside and I climb. It does that for me. I try to eat healthy, organic, whole food. I don't stress about it too much. I do try to incorporate every now and then variances, though, like intermittent fasting or fasting. Also, I do like to have, a lot of people call it Walmart day or whatever, but I call it impulse day, where you don't try to stifle all your impulses. It doesn't mean I walk around like a crazy person throwing cats and stuff, but stifling your impulses, those deep-seated habits all the time, I don't think is 100% healthy. So I try to nourish them a little bit while, still being a functioning member of society. Yeah. And
give me an example of something like that for you.
Yelling out in nature, or to me, think of, if you watch a bird or a chicken, okay? Think chicken, and not, in a sterile pen, but kind of one that gets to roam a little more like a natural setting. They'll dig a little and then they'll run over here and they'll do a little something else. They got no real rhyme or rhythm. Yeah, they're looking for food, but they kind of eat when they want to eat, sleep when they want to sleep, not on some kind of cycle all the time, a little bit like that. Think like that, kind of a little bit more wild.
So we're going a little long here, but I want to know the application process for your experience. I want to know, because I at my gym, what I've done with athletes, I've kind of found a little bit of a niche with people who are on the couch and are coming to their first fitness experience, right? And they're not fit at all, right? And so and so I've had a lot of success there with getting those people into the gym and like achieving their first, CrossFit workout or their first pull-ups or their whatever it may be. And so your application process, I'm going to tie that together. So what do you tell a person that is not ready for your experience, if is on maybe he's in pretty good shape, but you know, mentally and physically, but just not quite there. What kind of advice do you give a person to get to the point where, man, I can go do this experience. I know I can.
Yeah.
I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, because it comes up a lot, because uh, we hate saying no, because we don't want to rob anyone of anything that they potentially want to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when I do my interview, it's very thorough, and it's designed to um, really assess their psychology as much as I can on a phone interview with no video. And I do it with no video for a reason. So when I look at physical fitness, okay, how do we? There's an abundance, right? Really, just get out and walk and move and run a little. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to start too complicated. But when it comes to building good psychology, you know, you gotta think about your habits, your relationships. You gotta look back in the past. You know, like we have wounding from our parents, and it's not to, you know, necessarily have bad parents or parents that tried to imprint anything that was negative, but there is wounding there that happens, that comes out later on, that potentially you're not moving through your flow as good as you can be. And like, I think for me, my parents used to tell me, "Oh, you're such a hard worker." And then whenever it came to doing work, I would just work my ass off without really any kind of purpose, you know, because that's like, that was the story that I was, you know what I mean? And it was like, well, wait a minute here. This isn't really, it's not bad to be a hard worker. You know, they didn't say it to wound me, if you will, in any possible way, but this isn't helping me get ahead. Now I got to revector, you know? So that, you know, you got to look to the past, you got to look to the future, you got to look at now, you got to look at your relationships. I do believe this is a big one, who you choose to surround yourself with. Everyone knows this, but really, when you go to work on it, sometimes you might say and find things you don't really necessarily love. But then I think the most, it's been said many times before, and I'll say it again: experience. Go and experience life. Anything that gives you that visceral gut reaction of like that, what we call a fear response, where it's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to go that way. It's just your body telling you to approach cautiously. It's not, that's usually the way you got to go to evolve, you know? Keep pushing those comfort zones, then come back, and then we can reevaluate from there.
Right.
Because you can really build your character. Modern science has shown all the time that our psychology is not set in stone. There is some things that are in our genetics, but it's programming that we can do something about, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have, I like to talk about books with people. Do you have a couple of books that you could recommend? Like, if you haven't read this book, you should go and read it.
Okay. So I am a fan of trying to read as much as possible, with a variances of, you know, as much as possible. We think with words. That's how we think. So it's good to always be consuming words. I personally, like I mentioned earlier, I like a bit of, I like books that talk in story and metaphor.
because that would be super cool.
Yeah, we do have some plans in the work for that exact thing, because we have a saying, the process never ends. It's a total journey of life. It began when they first met us, goes through the 8 days, and it'll continue on if they choose to put in that time.
Right. Oh, real quick, you're going to do it again. Are you going to do this every year?
Yeah.
So the plan is, again, next May, you would do another one, or?
Yeah, so the time frame isn't going to necessarily be the same all the time, and neither is the location, but once a year. I don't want to start mass producing it. I don't want it to be watered down, and I just don't think that we can logistically do it. But yeah, once a year. I think early June, the dates will be sent out. Right now, there's just a wait list building up.
Gotcha. So how long before, when do you start taking applications? Are you just going to take them all the time, or?
Well, so like I say, there's a wait list going right now.
Okay.
And then June, when we release the dates, we'll start with the wait list, and then we'll start taking applications, and then we'll start going through for the next serial. The next one has some exciting things. I'm gonna leave off on that. Some changes that'll really make it a lot more exciting. Not that it isn't exciting, but just kind of the next level up, if you will.
That's awesome. Well, all right, Jeff, I really appreciate it. And hopefully I can talk to you again in the future and just check in.
Yeah, no problem, Vaughn. It was a real pleasure.